Did Tennessee's best shot at a playoff bid sail wide right? Or will the loss to Georgia ultimately help the Vols' resume in making the college football playoff? Welcome to the Volunteer State. I'm Tennessee beat writer Adam Sparks, along with John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel. The Vols are licking their wounds after a gut-wrenching 44-41 overtime loss to Georgia. In the moment Saturday night, it certainly felt like a lot was lost, and not just that one game. But a second look at sort of the national reaction to the game, I think should make you feel better about the way that the loss was perceived. So we're going to try to make sense of how all this affects UT's playoff odds. But first, John, I want to go through some of these Josh Heupel decisions to criticize. That's the heading we'll put on this. Um, I'm sure you got a number of emails. My mailbag was full of these, of a lot of gripes about how Josh Heupel blew it on a decision. We could go through all these and do the entire pod on this, but I'm not going to take up all that much time. So, John, I want you to pick one of these that you think is the most legitimate gripe. Okay, number one, not being more aggressive after the strip sack in the fourth quarter, settling for a field goal. That's number one. Number two, did Josh Heupel mismanage the way the field goal was set up at the end of regulation? Number three, not going for the 2-point conversion when it was 34-0, could have made it 36-0. Does that make a difference? Or just number four, is there something else I'm forgetting? Any of those jump out to you, John, as a very legitimate gripe that Josh Heupel screwed up?
Yeah, I had no emotional investment in the outcome, so I don't get as upset as my readers do with a loss of this magnitude. In a game like that, Adam, as you well know, so many things happen, so many lead changes back and forth, changes in momentum. So it's really easy to second guess a lot in a 44-41 game that ends in overtime. I guess the one thing I would probably go with, if you're committed to kicking a field goal at the end of the game, and I don't have any problem with not being more aggressive earlier. I don't know what defense Kirby was in after that strip sack. And I think by that point, I think he said, well, we're not going to give him anything easy. And maybe I'm overthinking it, but maybe Kirby's thinking you see teams gain a turnover, make seemingly a momentum changing play, and they want to strike while the defense is, as soon as it comes out. So, but I didn't have so much of a problem with that. I can see why you could make that point. But once you decided to kick a field goal, I just wouldn't have run another play. I would just said kick the field goal there at the end.
Okay,
Or,
so there at the end of regulation,
yeah,
when the false start occurred, you're saying you would have never run that play?
I just wouldn't have run the play. I would have just gone ahead and said, if we're committed to kicking the field goal, let's kick it. If you feel comfortable with Gilbert kicking the ball at this juncture, go ahead and kick it. Don't run another play. That was and I understand the reasoning behind running another play. You want to get things just right and all that good stuff. But I think I would have just kicked it. But that's not a real. I don't have a major gripe about that.
Yeah, I like the phrase you just used. I understand the reasoning. I think that's sort of where I landed on a lot of these. And if you read my mailbag, that's sort of what I went back to, is that I can see Monday morning quarterback of why you should have done this, not that on some of these. But all of them had a logic behind them. It's not like trying to think of a college example, but a little over a week ago in the Tennessee Titans opener, the Titans coach had a situation where he should have challenged a call of when an elbow was down. He didn't know the rule. He didn't know an elbow down meant 2 feet for his own player and made a catch. So he didn't challenge the call on the field because he didn't know the rule. He didn't know the NFL rule that an elbow down is equals 2 feet, and so that's a gaffe. Like that's a coaching mistake. That's a you dummy. All of us in the stadium knew what you should have done. The quote unquote mistakes by Josh Heupel, if you want to call them that, were not "Hey dummy, we all knew." It was just you could do A or you could do B, and he picked A, and maybe B would have worked out better. But we can't really you can't really say that. I mean, yeah, I think I see the logic in all of them. The strip sack, maybe be more aggressive on third down, throwing the ball. Now, we'll say if you go back and you run through that play, the third down play several times, there was a play to be had there. It was a missed block. It was a trap play, I think. There's a missed block. If there's not the missed block, Deshaun Bishop probably picks up 6 of the 8 yards, and Tennessee may go for it on fourth down. Josh Heupel said they probably would have gone for it on fourth and short. So I can see why he did that against that defense. But if you had to do it again, yeah, you probably throw the ball. Hot quarterback, Chris Brazzell's catching everything. You probably throw the ball. Maybe a mistake. The field goal you're talking about, there were so many ways that could have ended up. If you don't run the play, you're kicking a 38-yarder instead of a 43. Does that feel easier to Max Gilbert? If you don't get the penalty, obviously it's it's much more it's more makeable, I guess. Maybe you get the angle you want and it's a shorter field goal. I had some other readers that said, why not go ahead and run the extra play? You lost 5 yards on the penalty. Well, get some yardage back and get it where you want to be. But the thing is, Georgia and everybody else in that stadium knew Tennessee was going to run the ball. They're going to run the ball about 6 or 7 feet to the right. And the play was just going to be Joey Aguilar falls down a yard behind the line of scrimmage to the right because you're just trying to center the ball to kick it. And so that would have been a loss or a no gain or maybe even a bigger loss or maybe a penalty again. There's a number of things that could have gone wrong there. I guess if you wanted to make one overarching criticism of Josh Heupel is all the things that I'm describing are risk assessments, and he went with the less risk, the more conservative approach. Some things could go wrong here, so let's not tempt that. And he went the safe route a little bit, which you could say that doesn't seem like Josh Heupel. You could also say you need to be safe and try to get whatever points you can in a game like this. So what he did was logical, didn't work out. I thought up to that point he outcoached Georgia's coaching staff. I thought the plan in that game offensively was just phenomenal. It's John. I got the sense that you don't think Josh Heupel should be blamed for this loss.
No, see, I come away with my takeaway is Josh Heupel's offense just scored 41 points on Kirby Smart's defense. Wow.
Yeah.
This is a defense that had thoroughly stymied Tennessee every time. I mean, Georgia's, and this was predates Heupel's arrival, but once Heupel came here with a high-flying offense, I mean, he goes out and he scores 52 on Alabama in 2022. Then he runs into Georgia and gets about 35 points fewer. So no, this is a defense he hasn't been able to solve with his offense, and he solved it Saturday. Tennessee overwhelmed Georgia at the outset. So I can't shake that. No matter how the game played out and despite the final score, that was my takeaway, that if he can score 41 points on Georgia, and I know this isn't in Georgia's national championship team, but I also know this is talented defense. Despite how it looks Saturday, Georgia has talent on defense. If he can do that, if Heupel can do that, I don't know who's going to slow down this offense the rest of the way. So I was encouraged by that from a Tennessee perspective.
Yeah, and you wonder if there's a little bit of a tail to this game. I mean, something that will linger, something that will have an after effect in this matchup specifically. I was talking to Mark Weiser, the Georgia beat writer, on the walk, late at night, Saturday night after the game. We were walking through the parking lot to our cars, and he made a good point to me. He said, this is a matchup where Josh Heupel could never figure out Kirby. It was always a mismatch. It was the same formula every game, never worked. And this game was exactly the type of game that Tennessee wants and can win, because it looked like the Alabama game from 22, right? Just a bunch of points up and down. Georgia had a hard time stopping Tennessee for a lot of the game. He made the observation that feels a lot like the mountain that Kirby had to climb to get over Nick Saban, because Nick Saban had the answer for Kirby year after year after year. It just seemed like Georgia was not going to win that game. And then it got close. Was that maybe the national title game, the fourth and whatever, where Georgia outplayed Alabama?
But lost.
Yeah, but lost. And you said, well, one hand, well, if they didn't win that one, they're never going to win one. But on the other hand, Georgia later beat Alabama. And so you could see sort of in retrospect, oh, the signs were there that this was turning, that Kirby eventually was going to break through because the formula was starting to change and he had figured out some things. It was just an observation by Mark Weiser, the Georgia beat writer. And I think he may be writing about this week, that beware, because something Josh Heupel has figured out he may use in their next matchup, whenever that is, if that's later on in the season or next season. So I wonder if this has a little bit of a tail. So, John, what I promoted there at the beginning of what this episode's mostly going to be is how that affects our view of Tennessee as can they be a playoff team? And we were hashing this out a little bit today after Josh Heupel's press conference. Me and some other UT media members, other beat writers that cover the team for other outlets, and particularly 3 or 4 of us that were together at the end said, "Hey guys, what do you think?" One of these writers said, and I'm not going to give away names; they have their own podcasts, but one of these writers said, "This feels 8-4 to me." And he said, you had to win that one, and you didn't. Injuries are piled up. There's some unknowns there. Could lose to Oklahoma. May lose at Mississippi State. Could lose Florida. Probably going to lose Alabama. This feels like 8-4 because you missed that opportunity. Another writer sitting there said, actually, I feel great about 9-3 right now for this team. And I absolutely could see this team in the playoff because of how they played in that game. So, John, I give you sort of those two options or something in between, and I'll give you my take after this. But how did that game change or reinforce your view of Tennessee as in terms of their playoff chances?
Adam, it gave me a much better view of Tennessee. When we went into that game, I say we as to cover it. When going into that game, when you look, I didn't know how good Tennessee was. You just
Yep.
don't know when you play. That's a bad Syracuse team, and then you play ETSU, totally overwhelmed in terms of talent and depth. So I really didn't know what to expect, and you can't help but look at the history in trying to project the future. And the history is Georgia's dominated this series. I go back to the point I made earlier. Josh Heupel's team scored 41 points on Kirby Smart's defense. It's a talented defense. I think Georgia's the best team on Tennessee's schedule. So I feel like Tennessee, unless Georgia just goes in the tank and has a precipitous fall, and I certainly don't expect that. I saw a lot of things about Georgia that I like, despite its defensive problems. So I think Tennessee to me looks like a 10-2 team.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, especially with what you're saying about you didn't know what Tennessee was till this game, because I wondered if we would come out of this game still not knowing, and us saying, well, you got to play a comparable team. Georgia's much better. Syracuse and ETSU were worse. You just don't know yet. But yeah, I came out of there. I mean, especially with the offense, this had a very 2022 feel to it. I mean, we were all thinking the same thing when they were driving down there to try that last field goal. This is Bama 22. Look the same, almost the same score. Um, and my feel coming out of it, especially about Joey Aguilar, he done it against bad teams. Could he do it against Georgia? He absolutely did. Dude threw for nearly 400 yards and accounted for 5 touchdowns. Do they have the receivers that can match up with Georgia's stud DBs? Well, Chris Brazzell did a pretty good Jalen Hyatt imitation. 3 touchdowns, nearly 200 yards. Mike Matthews looked good. Braylon Staley looked great. The Miles Kitselman was good at tight end. This passing game looked great against a secondary that's loaded with high 4 and 5-star players. So, yeah, I'm more optimistic about Tennessee in these other games for the same reason maybe my memory goes back to 2022. Because, John, if you remember that, you just had the sense that unless it was, a top 5 team, Tennessee was just going to score 50 on everybody. It didn't really matter. And they may give up a bunch, but they were just going to outscore people. That's why I look at the schedule now and say, at Mississippi State, it'll be a tough road game. That's there's no doubt about that. That's not necessarily an easy place to play, but this is not. This is a team that I think can go in there and score 40 or 50 on Mississippi State. Now Mississippi State may score a lot too, but I have confidence in Tennessee's offense more now than I certainly did before the Georgia game. Arkansas last year was a slugfest because Tennessee just had to try to get to 21, to try to win that game. I don't think that's going to be the case in this Arkansas game. He's going to have the ability to put up a lot of points on a lot of people. And if you win those, you can get on down the line, Alabama, Oklahoma, Florida, so on. But just my sense of Joey Aguilar and this passing game and already the run game. I mean, John, is there anybody on their schedule that they can't score 40 on? They just scored 41. Is there anybody on their schedule that you say there's no way they can score 40 on that team?
I don't think they can score 40 on Oklahoma.
Okay.
Not the defense I've watched this season in Oklahoma's part. But I don't know what Oklahoma will look like in November. It's got a brutal schedule. There will be attrition. And so that's the game, and playing at Neyland Stadium. So if I had to pick a game, I just think Brent Venables is a great defensive coach, but Kirby Smart is too. So yeah, if I had to pick one game, at Alabama, maybe that would be a lot to ask to score 41, but I wouldn't rule it out. The rest of these games, 41 might be a bad day.
Huh.
I look at Mississippi State, UAB, Mississippi State, Arkansas. None of those teams play good defense. I mean, they don't play anything close to good defense. So I think Tennessee is just going to pile up some points. Kentucky's defense is better than those, but then look at the rest of the schedule. I don't know what Florida will be like by the time we get to late November. I'm not sure who its coach will be. I don't think it will be Billy Napier, and that team might have been mailing it in. And I don't think the Swamp will be a very, very dangerous place for opponents by then. I think it will be pretty mild environment. So yeah, I'm with you. I think if you could score 41 on Georgia, I look at the rest of the schedule and think 41 would be maybe below average.
Boy, and this this reemphasizes a point that we've talked about a couple times now this season already, and just news alert here. This is the Nico segment we're about to go into. I don't know how long we'll drag this out for the year, but there's an interest in it for obvious reasons. It was a de facto trade between Joey Aguilar and Nico, UCLA to UT, and vice versa. And this week, the news of, UCLA's 0-3. Deshaun Foster, their coach, got fired. Who knows where things are going to go in that program now? Nico does not have help there. He didn't have playmakers. Doesn't have an offensive line. Doesn't have a run game. The team he left behind has a run game, 210 rushing yards a game. It's an offense that leads the SEC in scoring right now, 51, 52 points a game. These receivers that, according to Nico's representatives, just could not cut it. just had 400 yards receiving, close to that, against a lockdown defense. The team he left behind looks pretty good, and it just makes you think even more now that we've seen Joey Aguilar against Georgia's defense and not just Syracuse, ETSU. Boy, John, doesn't it just really speak to the fact that maybe Nico wasn't just a young game manager? Maybe he was the guy that was holding back that whole offense. I mean, is that fair now?
I think it's very fair. I think it's accurate. Uh, I look back not just at last season, but 2023. Uh, Tennessee had two strong arm quarterbacks. Joe Milton in 23, he could knock a building down with his fastball. Nico Yamaleava, if he hadn't followed Joe Milton, people would have been shaking their heads and thinking, wow, I can't believe this guy's arm. I mean, watching him against for UCLA last Friday, he was just throwing bullets, man. I thought he was going to knock a receiver unconscious. But not all those passes were completed. I look back at how I assess games, and you're in the moment, so you take what you see and evaluate. Last year, weak at offensive tackle, couldn't protect the quarterback in a passing situation. Receivers very ordinary, very ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I look back, maybe those receivers weren't that bad. Maybe those tackles weren't that bad. Maybe the quarterback was holding them back. Maybe it wasn't a case of they were holding back the quarterback or even endangering the quarterback. It's probably a combination that they weren't as bad as I thought, and Nico wasn't as good. Obviously, I misjudged him. I thought he was going to be a star quarterback, but then even after I devalued that and said no, he's not going. He's going to get better though. I don't know that he's gotten any better, and I think there are just some natural holes in his game. I just don't think he sees the field well and processes things in real time. So now it's like the quarterback, Joey Aguilar, looks so much more comfortable in this offense than Yamaleava did or Milton did. And you see what's happened with the offense. If you'd have gone from Hendon Hooker to Joey Aguilar at quarterback, people would be saying, well, I don't know who's going to stop Tennessee's offense. It looks invincible.
There's a lesson within the lesson there of being patient, and that's really hard in college football these days, because yeah, if you're Nico, and I mean, let's be straight, and Nico, as guided by his dad and his representatives, Nico left for more money. That's what that was about. But the narrative after the fact was that he left, and there's a that he left because Tennessee did not have enough of a supporting cast around him. That was actually a gripe behind the scenes, but it wasn't part of that wasn't the reason he left. That was just one of the critiques. Um, it, but if you look back at that now, I mean, if he had patience, he would have said maybe Lance Hurd, who struggled last year, will be good next year, because that was his first year. He was injured. First year coming into the system from LSU. Well, a year later, yeah, Lance Hurd's been pretty good. The young offensive linemen that they have, the transfers they brought in, maybe that will pan out. Well, guess what? It did. Mike Matthews, who just couldn't really find a place in the rotation last year, maybe he'll pan out. He has. Same with Chris Brazell. Uh, Same with Braylon Staley. Like, there needed to be some patience there, maybe patience for all of us, but certainly patience for Nico, because a lot of the things that they thought weren't going to work out, um, looks like they've worked out. Certainly, you can say that now after they played that way against Georgia. John, I guess I didn't give my initial take on Tennessee overall for the season. I don't feel any different about Tennessee after that loss than I did before. In fact, I may feel a little better about UT's playoff chances, because I picked Tennessee to go 9-3 in the preseason. I chalked up the Georgia game as a definite loss. This is one of their 3 losses. They'll lose a couple more. They'll miss out on the playoff barely, but they'll be in contention. That's the way that I had them in the preseason. So I had this as a loss. I thought this would be a bigger loss than overtime, about 3 points in overtime. So I think there's still absolutely a path to get to the playoff. And I think some of the games that we thought would be the hardest games may not be. Some of the games we thought would be gimmies, that may flip a little bit. Mississippi State will probably they'll be undefeated. They'll probably be ranked when Tennessee goes there. Um, Oklahoma has a really, really good quarterback. You mentioned that their schedule could beat them up a little bit between now and then. We don't know about Alabama. Ty Simpson has the best passer rating right now in the SEC, but he also has a loss. And there's some questions there at Alabama. What is? I mean, I'll pick Tennessee to beat Vandy in Neyland. Every day of the week, every year. I know it hasn't happened like that 100% of the time, but I don't. I feel like Tennessee's got good chance to win that game. But Vandy's pretty good right now in September. So there's a lot of games that could look different when they get there. I have no idea what kind of Florida team Tennessee's going to see in the swamp, or whoever the coach or the quarterback is going to be. So a lot to be said, but I just feel like Tennessee's chances at the playoff feel just as good now as they did a week ago before that Georgia game. Had they beat Georgia, you would feel great about it. I still feel okay about it. John, I haven't even looked at the playoff odds. I don't know if you follow those or not, but
It's too early for that.
we don't even know who's good yet, right? I see a lot of these things like, well, we know they're good because they beat so and so team. Well, so and so team may not actually be good. We're basing that on preseason rankings. But I mean, John, would you? I feel like Georgia's really good. I don't think it's. I would be shocked if Georgia ends up not being good this year.
Yeah, the thing is, well, this early in the season, 3 weeks in, because just focusing on the SEC, this is similar to the rest of college football. At this point, most teams have only played one real game. In a lot of these cases, they were overwhelming opponents. So we're really basing our judgment on one game because in Tennessee's case, I don't look at anything that happened against ETSU or a bad Syracuse team as, I got a pretty good idea what Tennessee is now. No, it's all about the Georgia game, how I view Tennessee. Look at other teams the same way. For example, Alabama, it's bounced back, won convincingly the last 2 weeks, but those were terrible teams. My strongest opinion about Alabama was formed in that opener against Florida State when it got manhandled. I can't shake that image just because it's won 2 games. So we're really basing our opinions kind of on 2 games. I mean, 1 game, Texas A&M. Nobody cares that it beat what was it, Texas? Utah State and Texas San Antonio. But no, it came back at South Bend and beat Notre Dame. I mean, we really don't know how good or bad Notre Dame might be. So it's still kind of early to ascertain how good teams are.
And I think in this era, it actually there's a reason to wait because in the old era, a decade ago, you still knew who 9 times out of 10 who was going to be good and not good. This now in this era, when so much of the portal has flipped rosters, you kind of don't know. In that way, I think Tennessee, you could argue, has one of the best losses on the resume so far, especially if Georgia, keeps winning. Let's say they beat Alabama in a couple weeks. If Georgia is a playoff team, then Tennessee has a very good loss. And that was something I was talking to somebody in the last 48 hours, talking to a few people about this. Tennessee fans that were just distraught. I can't believe this happened. There's no way to come back from this. All the typical reactions. And I said on Saturday night and even Sunday morning, I said, wait to see the reaction nationally, because I don't think you guys, UT fans, realize how this will be looked at nationally. It'll be looked at in a pretty positive light for Tennessee. And sure enough, the polls came out Sunday. Tennessee didn't move an inch, didn't drop at all. How often do you see a team lose at home and not move in the polls at all? Still number 15 in the coaches, gain respect from the coaches. Still number 15 from the riders in the AP poll. So you're at the same place. I listened to a number of podcasts, read some columns from national outlets after the game, and they all had sort of the same take, which was, "Hey, UT looks like a playoff worthy team," and those outlets did not think that before that game, but they came away saying, "Well, if they can, I mean, if that kid just kicks that ball like a few yards to the left, you know, Tennessee looks like a shoe in for the playoff. The fact that he missed that kick doesn't change everything else that happened." And so the takeaway nationally was, yeah, Tennessee looks like a playoff team if they can take care of business. Joey Aguilar gained a lot of respect as a legitimate high-end SEC quarterback who can run this offense against anybody. Chris Brazzell and those receivers gained a lot of respect. I even saw something from Todd McShay today, the NFL draft analyst, and he had a video up of Chris Brazzell saying that he may be one of the top wide receivers in the draft class. Now think about the leap that took from last season, and I don't know that that's going to hold, but nationally, Tennessee is looked at in a pretty positive light after that, and I only bring that up to say, the playoff, when you consider playoff resumes, beating Georgia would be phenomenal for Tennessee. Losing in overtime to Georgia, if Georgia ends up being really good, doesn't hurt you quite as much as you think it might. John, is this just Tennessee needs to root for the Bulldogs the rest of the season, right?
Yeah. In fact, I wrote a column about that for Sunday. That to me, Tennessee can attach itself to Georgia. You want all your teams on your schedule. That it enhances strength of schedule if the teams on your schedule have success. As hard as that might be for fans to pull for their adversaries and greatest rivals, but that's just a fact. And it's different now than when you're trying to win a conference championship. Everybody thinks in a playoff terms. So you want Georgia to do really well. Best case scenario for Tennessee, Georgia goes unbeaten through the regular season against a pretty tough schedule. It beats Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Florida, Texas, Georgia Tech, which is a threat now after beating Clemson, is unbeaten. That's the team you attach yourself to. You could say, well, any team you beat, you feel that way about, but no, that was probably your high profile game, and it perhaps the most image affecting game that you can play first half of the season. And that can kind of linger. So as Georgia keeps winning and Tennessee, say, keeps winning, the national outlook is going to be, well, Georgia's just what we thought it was. And Tennessee was right there, a kick away. Tennessee led Georgia 21-7. So, yeah, I think that's what you hope for. Georgia goes unbeaten, and that to me enhances Tennessee chances. If you're 10-2 and you play in the SEC, I think you're in the playoff.
Yeah, a lot of things that the playoff committee they want the answer to the question, is this team worthy of the playoff? And I think they would look at that game and say, well, yeah, it's a coin flip between Georgia and Tennessee. And again, that's different. The way that this game was played, that the fact that it was so different from the last few, I think makes it easier to make that case, because I think any onlooker coming away from that game says, well, if they met on a neutral site field, let's say in the SEC championship game, that's a coin flip game if they played again. You would not say that any time in the past, because it looked like Tennessee figured out some things. If Tennessee and Georgia played 5 times, Tennessee wins 2. And I think that's the definition of a strong resume, including a loss like that. But who knows how things are gonna hash out by the end of this. John, I know you have an SEC podcast with Blake Topmeyer that I'm sure probably touched on some of this, or will touch on some of this. But I came away from this weekend in the last couple weeks thinking the SEC championship game is going to be between like an 11-1 and a 10-2 team or something like that. I don't see two elite teams running the table and meeting in Atlanta. Am I way off to think that? I feel like there's just some parity there.
No, you could have two 10-2 teams, in fact.
Yeah,
And in a way, a nightmare for the SEC would be just a bunch of 9-3 teams.
could happen.
Last year, you had some of that. This year, there's the potential for even more of it. When I look at Georgia's schedule, a month from now, we'll know a lot more about Tennessee's playoff chances, not just because of what Tennessee does, but you look at Georgia plays Alabama, Kentucky, Auburn, and Ole Miss in succession in the middle of the season. Georgia wins all those games. Tennessee is really, really in a good spot going down the stretch.
Yeah, because then you're saying, well, did anybody knock off Georgia? And they'll say, well, one team got really, really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
And if Tennessee has the right record, but yeah, again, it's 10-2. It's what you got to get to. I mean, does a 9-3 Tennessee team get in? Yeah, in the preseason, I said definitely not. I would still say probably not. The only thing I would add to that conversation is, are Tennessee's opponents in this what we thought was a weak schedule, are they a little better than we thought? I don't know, but what if Mississippi State ends up being not bad, pretty good? What if Arkansas, they do have a quarterback, they have an offense, ends up being a little better? What if Oklahoma does win a long stretch of these, but Tennessee's a team that beats them? What if Vandy's an 8-4 team? There's some possibilities here of teams that are maybe a little better than what they were, could help out Tennessee. But yeah, 10-2 is still the mark, I think.
I really think it would be important for Tennessee to beat Oklahoma because
Yes.
when I look, if I'm just looking at the schedule from this vantage point, if Oklahoma goes 9-3, it should be in the playoff. A 9-3 Oklahoma team that's played as of last week, all 8 of its SEC opponents were in one of the 2 top 25 polls. It plays pretty much all the top tier teams. So that to me is a game. If you want to make a case for yourself, win that game against Oklahoma. I think it would mean more because of if Oklahoma's good and wins down that stretch. But I think if Oklahoma beats you and Oklahoma's 9-3 and you're 10-2, I could see the selection committee taking Oklahoma against that schedule.
Oh, I see. You're saying not just the fact that you would beat a good team on Tennessee's
Yeah.
resume. You're saying head to head if those two
Yes.
were compared to each other. That's a
Uh,
good point. Because you don't get that in like we think of Florida as a coin flip game for Tennessee, just because it's at the Swamp, then one in there and forever. But you're not going to go head to head with Florida for a playoff spot, because Florida's going to be looking for a head coach, not a playoff spot. So yeah, that's a good point. And when you get down to it, we saw that with last year. What was it? Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. You had all this crazy math and equations of like, well, if this team beat that team, but that team beat this team, and what time of the year was it, and what quarterback was in and out, and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, if you get down to those two, and you're looking at strength of schedule, if you can always go back and say, well, Tennessee beat John Mateer in Oklahoma, by 7 on November 1st, then you really then you could hold your case in that one. John, let me jump to a newsy item before we close this out. Today, as we record this is a Monday afternoon. We're recording this. Josh Heupel gave um, the most injury updates that I've heard him give in a long time, and part of that is the reason. Part of the reason is that Tennessee's playing UAB this week, so you would think it doesn't matter much. Um, the other part is that I think David Sanders, at least online on the peripheral, has been getting some flack, and maybe Josh Heupel has been getting a little flack about why David Sanders, his 5-star tackle, has not played yet. So Josh Heupel was more talkative about the injuries this week than he has been. I'll give you the quick updates. I'll start from the best news for Tennessee fans to the what I would say is the worst news. Best news: Jackson Moy, defensive tackle, who's been out since he got hurt a few plays into the season. Jackson Moy is quote unquote day to day. I think that means he's definitely going to play against Mississippi State. Whether or not he gets a little time against UAB, we'll see. Doesn't matter, but he should be back for Mississippi State. Defensive tackle David Hobbs, who's been out all season with a foot injury. The thought was he would be ready for Mississippi State, and I think there's still a decent chance of that. If not then you hold him through the off week after that, and he plays against Arkansas. Not terrible news. It's okay news. David Sanders is a weird one because David Sanders may play this week against UAB, or he may be out for a while. And Josh Heupel was pretty straightforward, saying, "We don't know. We don't know. The doctors don't know." He said it's out of David's control. It's a shoulder injury officially, but it's my understanding it's what you'd call a stinger, which is like shoulder, neck, nerves. There's bad things that can happen if that injury, worse things that can happen if that injury isn't managed correctly or treated correctly. David has been pretty good lately, but obviously they held him out of the Georgia games, probably for the best. You didn't want that to be his college debut. But as Josh Heupel said, it's a little bit of a mystery. It's unpredictable injury. He may be perfectly play right now, and he may get up tomorrow and the he can't play, and then it may flip to the next day. So that's not what Tennessee fans want to hear, but it's very unpredictable. So could play this week. It would be the best case scenario for him to play this week because it's UAB. Get out there, get a lot of reps, get your college debut out of the way, and then you can go to the Mississippi State game, either starting or in the rotation, and suddenly they have some good options in the rotation on the offensive line. Next on the list, Jermod McCoy. ACL, we know that he's been out. The All-American corner has been out since January. There was a thought that maybe he could get back in the first half of the season. I think that may still be on the table, but the vibes are not optimistic for that right now to me. John, this is the way that I asked Josh Heupel about it was like this. I said, is there the possibility that Jermod McCoy could play before the off week? Or is that just way too optimistic? And Josh Heupel's answer was the first off week. that's not a good sign. The first off week, because the second off week is in November. So maybe I'm reading too much into this, but Josh Heupel was sort of double checking to make sure I wasn't asking if Jermod McCoy could be back by November. I wasn't. I was asking if he could be back before the end of this month. And he said he didn't know. He said it's unknown. We don't know. We're evaluating it. That did not sound like he was going to be back soon. And then lastly, Ricky Gibson. I think it's a pectoral muscle, a tear or something there. That usually keeps you out months. And they're not pronouncing him out for the season, but that may be. With Jermod McCoy and Ricky Gibson, especially Jermod McCoy, I would say the likelihood and the speed at which, especially Jermod McCoy, comes back may depend on how the season is going. Let's say Tennessee gets upset at Mississippi State and then they lose to Alabama. You're out of the play. Is Jermod McCoy coming back after that, or is he just getting ready for the draft where he may be a first round, second round pick? But if you beat Alabama, and let's say you win all the way through then, and you're 6-1, and you're in late October, and he still hasn't played, I would think he would play by then. If he's going to play, he'll play by Alabama. John, do you feel good, bad, or somewhere in the middle about that injury report?
Well, as you were outlining those injuries, one thing came to mind. I wonder if the playoff selection committee will look at teams the way the selection committee does in basketball.
Yeah, I see where you're going.
When you look at the roster, you look at who's out, who's hurt, who's coming back. if Tennessee, if it's only lost a few games, if you look at didn't play Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson and David Sanders, three guys that are supposed to start. Jackson Moy, that's four starters out, and you lose to Georgia by 3 points in overtime. Well, at the end of the year, if McCoy comes back after the second open date, even if he just comes back and he plays the last couple of games and he does well, Moyes, of course, comes back. David Sanders is fine by then. Maybe even you get Ricky Gibson. It would be a different looking team, and I think it's only fair to factor that into your assessment as to how healthy a team is. In other words, Tennessee could be a better team at the end of the year, health-wise, than it is right now. May not be, but just based on those injuries. That's another way to look at the Georgia game.
Yep.
I mean, you lost to this one of the best teams in the country in overtime, and you weren't anywhere close to full strength.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard. We can get into the minutia, a lot of different injuries, and everybody has them, and you can say, well, this is a key position, that's a key position. It's hard to make that case with a lot of these when it comes down to the playoff, unless it's a quarterback. If you can say, hey, my quarterback was out that game and we lost, but my quarterback's back now, that's an easy case to make. The playoff committee doesn't want to know every single injury that you had to play through. But, yeah, the corners, Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson, would be in the category of you could make a case for two reasons. Number one, the playoff committee, that level of critique really looks at like first round picks. You have a first round pick at a very strategic key position, that means something. Hey guys, Jermon McCoy was out, first round pick guy, and then he's back now. He was playing without its best player. That's how you would say it. But then, part of that, if you lost two key guys at the same position, so you lose Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson, the Cliff's notes of that would be, hey, they were down their best player in that game when they lost to Georgia. Also, they were actually down both corners. That I think that carries some weight. I mean, Ty Redmond, the freshman, has played. He has exceeded expectations for a freshman that I think was a 3-star coming out of high school. He's played reasonably well. He couldn't get it done against Georgia to the extent that you would want him to, but you can't expect any freshman at that level to do that. He played 95 snaps in that game. Played the most snaps of any player on Tennessee's team, 95 snaps on defense. Second was Colton Hood, 94 snaps. So the two corners played the whole game. And I'm a little surprised they didn't put Jalen McMurray there to give them a little bit of a rest. He could have played corner some when Boo Carter was a star. But anyway, a freshman played your most snaps of anybody in place of your first-round pick at a key position. And there were key moments that Georgia picked on him, especially the force down, the touchdown, last touchdown of regulation. So we'll see. I mean, all this may be part of Tennessee's resume. It may not be, but they got to take care of business, and they got to win the games they're supposed to win. This week will be absolutely one of those. Tennessee kicks off against UAB, 12:45 Eastern at Neyland Stadium. I think the schedule has helped out Tennessee, as it probably will a few times this season, where even if you have a hangover over that loss, it's okay. You're playing UAB, and then you can rev up the engine again for a probably pretty challenging road trip to Mississippi State, one you can't drop. So we'll be there all along the way. Follow our coverage of the Vols at KnoxNews.com. Share this podcast with your fellow UT fans. We'd love for you to also subscribe. That way you can make sure you never miss us. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Volunteer State.